Hello, welcome back to DeAnn's Art Studio. I'm DeAnn Mealy. We've been painting a lot of roses, or well, I hope we have been painting a lot of roses the past few weeks. I certainly have. And so I wanted to share with you maybe another rose painting or another rose practice this evening or today, wherever you are in the world. And on yet another old book, but changing the hues up. And I get a lot of questions about, and comments even on social media about, wow, your roses look natural. How do you get them so quick? I love the shapes. I appreciate all the wonderful comments. Thank you so much. And, but I got to tell you, it does take practice. So that's my point in sharing a cup of coffee with you here tonight and picking up some paint brushes and giving another go at another old book, giving new life to another old book tonight, if you will. Every time you change hues, you got to remember too, the feeling will change, and you have to practice with different hues. You have to practice on different types of surfaces, whether it's on a canvas or maybe on tinware, furniture pieces. I've been painting on concrete floors and doors and different furniture pieces, and the feeling's always different. The composition, sometimes mentally you suddenly forget, oh my gosh, the three circles of the rose. Yeah, okay. So hopefully that's some of the information that will eventually ingrain into your mind and you'll take away from some of these classes. And so I'm filming and working a lot with the flowers, and I'll have an upcoming release of my first online class, Mastering Different Hues. And the first hue we're going to release is red, of course. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. So you'll hear more about that in the coming days. But while we're all staying at home and keeping our social distance and our physical spacing, there's no time like the present to get in some more practice with your roses. So without further ado, pick up a cup of coffee. If you have to take a sip or two just to get you going, that's okay. If you need to watch me through one time or two times and then come back and watch through and paint with me and pause, that's perfectly fine. Or pick up your brushes as we go and, go for it the first time, okay? All right. Let's go down to the book. Now, I have a burgundy canvas book tonight, and I'm propping it up because it does have a little bit of a glare. That might be a little steep. Let me pull something over just to give it a little less. There we go. And it has a little bit of a glare maybe because I did put a very thin coat of multi-surface sealer on this, okay? And that's because this book felt a little slick to me. I wasn't sure, it's a 1929 edition of a bunch of plays, and who knows how many hands it's passed through. Oils, I did wipe it down and did a little prep work, by putting the sealer on it just to make sure I don't want to fight with my paints. You don't want to get this too slick or everything's going to slide. It'll feel different. Now, if you are intending to perhaps, paint on tinware or other surfaces, those are going to feel different to you too. Let me rinse out my brush. It feels like I might still have some multi-purpose sealer on the side of that one. All right. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, compositionally, I have a lot of things I have to take into consideration. I've got to take into consideration the orientation of my surface, the background color, because I don't want to change the whole book. That's the whole purpose in these exercises is working smarter and not harder. So you've already got a kind of a base color, if you will. This is, to me, it may not look so on the camera. It is a warmer red as opposed to like red violet. So remember it's easier to cool a warm than it is to warm a cool. So I'll probably choose to start out a little warm. I'd also like to keep these kind of light and airy. So that'd be a little bit different technique for us this evening. And so we'll go from there. Wiping some multi-purpose sealer off of my palette over here. Now, let's look at my palette. I'll slide it over. I have quite a few color choices. I've been painting quite a bit the last couple days, and I just missed the palette. Now, I did change. I scooped them over to a new palette and add a little bit of fresh paint to them just a few minutes ago. But these, I take and mist the pure acrylic, mist them, and then I'll cover them with press and seal and leave them, come back and, pull it off. Yeah, you lose a little bit of paint, but they're usually pretty good under there. I also remind you again that I do divide my palette into warms and cools. Everything this way is warmer in relation to everything to my right. Alrighty, and I may not use all of these hues, but I have a lot of choices. Girl likes color. Girl needs a lot of colors to choose from, and what a wonderful way I can step off and create so many hues from the Heritage Multimedia Acrylics. You can paint in the basic 6 if you'd like. There are a few convenience colors on my palette, and also a few, I call them designer colors I like to add to my palette. But pine green, Hansa yellow, this is quinacridone gold, English red oxide, brown madder, medium white, derylide yellow, yellow oxide, and then my warmer red of the two, which we will go over. That's one of the reasons I'm going to work on this online class with Mastering the Hue of Red, because we have such beautiful line of reds in Heritage Multimedia Acrylics. So this is Naphthol Red Light and this is Naphthol Red. One is more of a red-orange, leans very much to the warm side, where Naphthol Red leads more to the cool side. So a warm and a cool red, red violet, quinacridone violet, cerulean, that's phthalo green blue. It's blue green. It seems like it might have seen. I may have to replace that one. I did put black out because I love to mix black with Hansa yellow for a nice pretty green. Of course, a healthy dose of titanium white. Sapphire blue is just a convenience color. Phthalo blue, and then this is dioxazine purple. And diox is so deep it's hard to see the color, so I'll show you it is purple. All right, it is a violet. So let me slide that over out of the way. Now, without further ado, I'm looking at this piece, and it's orientated obviously in portrait. So you have to take that into consideration. You don't just want to paint something horizontally. You want to kind of fill the space, if you will. And since this is a warm violet, I think I'm going to come over, my gut says come over in some brown madder, and I'm just going to kind of streak that into my background and real casually. Okay, go ahead and back up on your brush and casually apply some of that brown madder. All right, now that just, it's hard to see under the lights, but it does give me a variation. Then I'm going to slide over and pick up just a little bit of this yellow oxide and just kind of model it onto my brush right there with the brown madder, and I'm going to streak that in just for a little light, just for some variation. I love variation. Remember, as we say, my colleagues and I, variation is the key to interest. So you don't want anything, we don't want to have boring painting. Let's just go for it. Let your little artistic self flow. Some of this is what happens, and it was meant to be, and it's going to make a beautiful, beautiful composition when we get done, all right? And I'm thinking that that can actually handle a little more of that yellow oxide, so I'm going to go ahead and streak a little more of that, just pure in a few places. Don't overdo it. We can come back and add more as we start finishing up, all right? So I just kind of like that. That looks kind of pretty. Gives me a little variation. Now, I could come in with a cool color, but for me, since I said, it is easier to cool a warm than it is to warm a cool. So for me, sometimes, and especially for my students, when we're first starting out with the paints and the hues and learning new techniques, I stay away from it until we start adding in the greens and the foliage, and then you can start cooling in, streaking, or when you add like a reflective light, if you will, onto your flowers and into your composition, then you can go back and streak that in and marry everything together. So no worries there, okay? And as you develop your own brush calligraphy and your techniques and you adapt over, you'll know what works for you. Taking sapphire blue right now and putting a little into the background might be what you need. But for now, I'm going to not do that until I see just for the right time, okay? All right, so now I'm going to pick up, and I forgot to tell you, so I was using this 3/4 inch brush. It's a Heritage, it's made by Global Art, Heritage paints, but Global Art supply, and it is a fusion watercolor. As you can see, mine is well loved, and I think I've shown this on every single video in all my classes, and my students are just like, oh, but this is the best casual brush, and does wonderful grass. It does a wonderful casual background. Can you see the little thing she's got? Look at her. She's flaring out. Wonderful. And, these brushes are soft and they move. And I love the large brush and large brush techniques as well. So I'm going to switch over right now to a number 10 flat. Now, it doesn't matter if you feel more comfortable with a number 8. If you, I wouldn't drop down to a 6. You want to use as large a brush as possible to keep yourself very casual. And I'm going to be painting on the choked way back, not up. I'm not going to be way up here and get super duper tight. I'm going to be super loose, alrighty? And so I'm going to come in, and I think on this, I'm going to come in with some titanium white. My white is very, very thick, so I'm going to loosen it up just with a little touch of extender, all right? Maybe it needs a touch more. Mine's been sitting out all day. And I'm going to come in and establish where my design, where my composition, if you will, is going to be. All right, so I'm looking at maybe the queen of all roses. She's going to happen maybe up in this area. Very, very casual. We can soften that out and streak it out so you don't get too tight. And I know about half of you just had a heart attack right then, right? That's all right. We're just doing anything that will help make you more casual, alrighty? Remember, you're picking up color in your brush because you're painting wet into wet. Even though this is acrylic, they're still very wet. They're a full-bodied acrylic, all right? Now, I'm going to come down and I'm thinking, I'll probably go ahead and do another flower. It may be a rose or a bud, alrighty, down below. And I'll need to move this color a little bit, whatever color it ends up being. I'm looking towards warm, but I'm just trying to establish my composition right now. Notice I'm still real far on my brush, and I have no pattern transferred. I'm just kind of going very loose and moving color right now. I'm looking for color movement, alrighty? So I may have some things happening up in here. This may call for some sort of flower to occur down below it, and maybe something's going to trail off. We'll see, alrighty? And I can change to 5-petal flowers or any kind of accents that we want, but we're focusing on roses, so I am trying to, just kind of limit you. If you start limiting your study just a little bit when you're trying to learn the rose, it may help you out. But you can go back and add, after you do wildflowers and other different types of compositions, you can go back and add those to your composition with roses. Now, I really like where this guy is at, so I'm going to go ahead and just, if you will, opaque my white. Add just a little bit more, get a little braver with my white. And then you're like, well, okay, I'm modeling color. I'm modeling actually a variety of values of white in different tints because it is picking up the color that I laid down before it, alrighty? And I love to go back and experiment with just the opposite of what we're used to doing. It just kind of keeps your techniques fresh, alrighty? Now, I'm looking at this and I'm like, all right, I think I want to model in, we have that yellow oxide in the background, so I'm going to come in and just lightly push some yellow oxide in and around to model it in. And I have done nothing with establishing the throat or my 3 circles yet. I understand. I'm just approaching this just a little different, alrighty? And move my color, and we can change these up as we go. They don't all, I'm assigning a little bit of color to them for movement, but as my composition evolves, I'll probably go back and, lean those a little cooler or warmer or whatever. Now, I'm going to go in now and establish the center, the throat, if you will, of my rose, and that is going to be where the small petals are, the young petals, if you will. All right, so the throat of the rose is the coolest, and it will also be the darkest, the most contrast, the most depth is down in the throat of that rose. All right, and I'm just going to kind of walk it out. I'll probably need to go and intensify that and add some more color to it as we go. Now, this brown matter is a warm color, so I'm going to establish the bowl of my rose with the warm coming from that upper left to the top, and then I'm going to pinch wipe, and I'm going to reach over into some quinacridone violet and bring it down and model it in with my brown matter. And the first place I'm going to touch is right up there in my center because I know I have gone a little darker and cooler. All right, a little darker and cooler. and I'll just walk that out. All right, and my fingers work all the time. And don't forget to wipe your finger. Pinch wipe your brush, but you must also wipe your finger, okay? Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to establish on the other side. I'm going to work and establish the bowl, working up to the other side, a cooler side. And I think I really like to come in and just really cool that whole underside down. Alrighty. Now that does look pretty real cool, and I'm losing some of the bowl on that side, so I'll just come in and get some more of the yellow oxide and pick up a little bit of titanium white to lighten it. If it dies down a lot, remember when you mix two colors together, they will kill each other, okay? You don't have the intensity you once had. And I'm going to put just a little haunts of yellow in that and just kind of move some color on my bowl and drop it back into the back, as those are petals that are just kind of lost and found edges. And when you first load a brush, you don't want to just come to the back. I always start with maybe somewhere where my focal point is going to be, deposit my color, and then move it around. So I deposit and then push and pull it into place. You'll also notice on my brush that you can still see my reds, you can see my yellows. On the other side, I have a lot of yellow. You want to be able to use every part of this tool that you can. Let me see if I can bring it up to you and let the camera focus. All right, so you want to be able to use this chisel edge. You want to be able to use the brush up on ballet, pointer toe, that's your chisel. You want to be on the ball of your foot, and you can also use it flat. So you have a lot of different tools right there in that one brush, alrighty? So I'm going to take and just deposit a little more, and that paint needs to get a little sticky for me so that it doesn't move as much when I move my brush, all right? Lightening my pressure. Now, whatever I do up on the bowl of the brush, you also have a third section of your rose, whatever you do on a bowl of your rose, not your brush, you have a third section, which are your reaching petals. So these colors would actually occur. Obviously, they won't get isolated and not happen down in your reaching petals. Alrighty. Now you want to be careful to avoid what I call the tutu or the little skirt. We all do it. Just kind of, make that super duper casual. I am not thinking strokes yet. I'm thinking color movement. I'm thinking warms and cools. I'm thinking, gosh, my rose still needed her shadow to establish the bowl. Whenever you lose your bowl, keep up with it, restate it, okay? And I'm going to pull my cools back on this other side. Alrighty, so I'm kind of keeping my warm side up and my cool side down. Now, I'm going to take this color and I'm going to go ahead and start working the throat of the lower rosebud. All right, and I can, at this point, go ahead and maybe slice a little bit of color just if I was to, to establish the bowl. She might not be open. We're not real sure yet, alrighty? So if I open her up, she'll have to have, bowl, reaching petals, etc. I'm going to tap just a little bit of color, maybe up in this bud, just so that color moves. Remember, I told you can assign your color and then you can start moving your color with what you feel your flower is what your composition is gonna need. I feel like I could maybe pull this one a little more yellow, and maybe this one, and I may leave that one as the pink, and I may move some of those reds, pinkish reds around as we go. All right. Now I'm also going to come down and I'm going to pull some more yellow oxide down on the bowl of this bud right now. All right. Just pulling it on the bud. Now you want to be careful. You don't want to open up your rose and have it a smaller version of this one. They're either open or you have 3 generations, okay? You can have 3 generations. Let's talk about that for a second and what that actually means, okay? So what that means is you can have 3 generations. You can have a rose open, a beautiful flower that's open. It could be open to the point where it's almost spent. Then you would have maybe something that's partially open on the same bush, and maybe a bud or a real closed tight bud. Those are different generations of that same rose on that same bush. What we kind of tend to do sometimes when we're first learning and we're working in compositions is we'll paint one big rose, and then of that same rose we'll paint the same thing but just a little smaller. Well, that wouldn't occur on that same rose bush. Think about it. If you have a floribunda, all of the roses as they open tend to be about the same size if they're fully open. So you could have generationally one's closed up more than the other, but you really can't have 3 different sizes of the same rose, okay? A tea rose, one's real big, well, the other one fully open on the same bush is going to tend to be almost exactly the same size, all right? You could have a bud or one that's opening, different generations, okay? Does that make sense? All right. Let's go back to our painting. Now, I like to work around my painting too. I don't just focus on one flower because I like my paint to start tacking up. I'm going to come in. I picked up just a little bit, of red violet into my hue that I had there for the shadow. So just to cool it and deepen it, excuse me, just a little more. Now, these other roses, the buds, if they were on the same bush, they're going to have similar colors, okay? So for now, just to kind of keep your focusing on one hue, I'm going to drop down and drop that color onto that other flower as well, okay? Now, if I want, I could come in, I could say, well, this yellow is really modeling underneath my rose and modeled color, and I could come in and say, well, I'm going to come in and paint a white rose, but what would it look like if we came in now and we switched over to kind of a coral, okay? So if I switched over to a coral, it looks like I have messed up and put out the same red twice, so let me reach down, whoops, and it looks like I still have two, here we go. Need some naphthol red light. So if you look down here at my palette, both of these, when I added white to them, they're the same. So I must have got one of them mixed up there. And you can see I'm taking these right out of the tube, right onto my palette. There we go. Now that's naphthol red light. So you can see the warmth. And if you don't see that, when I added the white to it, I was like, whoops, under the lights it's difficult to see. But you can see the difference in this. When I bring this red down, this red has a much warmer tone to it. Let me tilt that up so you can see it. Does that make, there you go. And this one's very cool. So this is naphthol red and naphthol red light, okay? So I'm looking for the warmer red, and I'm thinking I'd love to take this rose and lean it over into the warmer reds and marry it onto this book just a little bit. So I'm going to come in now and just kind of coral up, and I have got that yellow up under it, all right? So I'm not going to cover all that yellow up. I'm just going to give it some hint of coral, okay? And I can move that color up and around, all righty, that's pretty. And I'm going to go in and maybe start establishing some reaching petals, all right? And remember, these reaching petals, they don't all come to one point. They actually go up under that rose all the way around. And I can slide over and pick up a little variation if I want, just to get a little bit more. Another layer, another addition to my reaching petals. I'm going to pick up some more yellow oxide, maybe a little more Hansa, warm that up even more, and pull just another little area of reaching petals. Let it cool down a little and slice in some more from the side. Now remember, anytime you lose your bowl, you want to go in and reestablish it. So I can just take my brush modeled in and come in and just kind of restate, if you will. I'm not afraid, just paint over paint. The more layers you have, the prettier that rose is going to be anyway. The light passes through a lot of different colors, okay? Now, I'm going to take in this yellow oxide, and I'm going to bring that down to this rose here and just kind of model it around a little more. Restate her shadow colors down at the base. And I want these to be in formal composition, so I'm going to want the two of them to actually touch, alrighty? So we'll have to work on that in just a few minutes. I'm going to pull this coral color up on the reaching buds, okay? Because if you create a color and you use it, you got to move it. Try not to cover up and lose all of my yellow. If you lose all of your yellow and you're still wanting to have a little of that yellow in there, there's no problem going back and restating it. You just got to lighten your touch, okay? All right, and that looks kind of pretty. I'm going to soften that out around and let her open up just a little bit, okay? And then I'm going to come in. I need to work on her throat just a little bit. Let that soften and let her start opening out just a little bit, okay? Nice, yeah. So we're having the basics of our composition. Now, at this juncture, I would probably rinse my brush, want to rinse, and pick up some more, go a little lighter. Now, as I go lighter, I don't want it to get super duper chalky, if you will. That's what happens when you jump values too quick. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick some Hansa yellow, not yellow oxide, over into that mix when I come in this time, and it just brightens it up just a little bit as I put my next layer of mottled color. And I'm looking at my rose and I'm like, what does my rose need, okay? I see that my coolness is kind of isolated there, so I'll handle that in a couple minutes. I think I want to come in and just maybe restate those first reaching petals just a little bit. All right. All the color that's underneath is really giving that a nice flare. I'm going to come in with a little bit of quinacridone violet and brown madder. Remember, those were my two shadow colors, warm and cool. And I'm going to go ahead and restate my shadow. Okay. Remember, if you start losing your bowl, you're going to want to restate that. And I see that I still have my center very cool. So while that other color of shadow is on my brush, I'm just going to wiggle in there, sneak in a little bit if you will, and warm that up just a hair. And yes, I know it's easier to cool a warm than it is to warm a cool, but it doesn't mean that it can't be done. It just means that it's easier, okay? And I do want to make sure I don't lose my bowl on this side, and I really feel like some of that burgundy will soften that rose out into that background just a little bit. So maybe I'll go ahead and pull that on around. That's going to be pretty. Go back to my coral colors and restate the back of my rose. So it's kind of a lost and found. It gives me a little bit of wet into wet. It gives me something to work into. It looks like I have a hair. I do have little furry friends here at my studio at the house where I film. There we go. Now, let's go in with pick up a little more white. I'm sneaking in on it, the highlights on this flower. A little more, a little thicker. I'm going to just a little bit of Hansa mottled into my brush, okay? I got quite a bit of paint on my brush. And now I'm going to sneak in there and I'm going to start working toward some of the highlights. Just where do the highlights need to be on this particular rose, okay? It's like, where's your light source? Where is your focal point? Where's your center of interest, alrighty? And I can start tickling around and softening, getting a little highlight. All right, I'm using every single edge of this brush, alrighty? And if you have trouble because you're picking up other color, the color under, and it's just not working for you, then you might want to use the 1, 2, 3 rule. Means strike it move it a couple times, get out and pinch wipe. All right? Get out and pinch wipe. And remember, not all petals have to come right to what you perceive to be that growth point, all right? Variation is the key. I'm going to come over and start pulling petals that turn my rose a little bit and open her up on that side. Very casual, I'm in a real casual mood tonight. I can feel my brush just feels super casual. I love it. And if you're uncomfortable with your reaching petals, I think I've told you this before, and you feel like you need to turn your book, you can. Just remember, when you start painting on furniture, you start painting on walls, that might make it a little bit difficult. Also, it can make you kind of stiff. So it is good to learn to do it without having to turn your piece over. But if you were to turn it over, this is where I'm looking at the next reaching petals. So I'm going to slice in. There's not enough contrast there to see it. So I'm going to come over. I need to get just a little bit of moisture, not too much, and lighten my paint just a little bit and give us another. Now, I have a hue that went a little cooler than what I would want it to. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to warm it up right away. I need it to be just a little warmer for where it's at in that composition on that rose. Where it's at on that rose, it was a little too cool, all right? And see, turn that, and that looks super nice. She's getting some nice work into her. I'm going to come in and I'm going to go ahead and cool that down as I move to that other side. Even though there's a cool reaching petal there in that center, I'm going to go ahead and cool down, maybe something in between, and give myself a little slice right through there, alrighty? And she's starting to come along nice. I love it when these roses just start, just a couple little strikes of the brush and you have it starting to come together, and it's like, wow, it's just fun to paint. I just love painting. That's it. I just love to paint. So I can see now that I can come in and I have need a little more paint. Remember, fat over lean, all right? Thick paint will stick to your thin paint. So if you're too thin, it's going to move. It's going to move on you, okay? It's not going to stay there. You got to use paint to paint. So don't be afraid to go ahead and just get your paint a little thicker as you start moving in your highlights. Okay? And start setting some of that texture on that rose. And I'm going to go ahead and lighten. I need just a little bit more moisture, so I dipped into a little extender. You might be able to do it with a little water, but remember, the watercolor brush, try not to get it too wet, okay? All right, and I'm going to lighten that just one more time right there on that edge and let her reach all the way over to the other flower that's sitting over there for now. Alrighty, let me grab another paper towel. Now, I love the textures and the casualness I'm getting on that rose. Now I'm going to come down to this little guy, and, I'm going to take and she has a lot of yellow oxide, and you got to decide how much detail, do you want it to be an open rose? Do you want her to stay as a bud? I'm thinking more of a bud. I kind of enjoy that look on these books. So I'm going to come into that naphtha red light, white, and I'm picking up a little bit of Hansa yellow, and I'm just going to slice across her. And she could be a bud from another rose that's in our composition. You just want to make sure she doesn't have more interest, okay? And I'm going to pick up, just modeling a little bit. I got a lot of stuff running together here on my palette, which is kind of pretty. So you can see the different runs of the warms and cool. It shows up really well there on the camera. And I'm just modeling my brush. I'm trying not to overblend, okay? And you can come in and slice and pull and just move a little bit of highlight. If you're not getting it light enough, no guts, no glory, go ahead and lighten her up. Pinch wipe. I am going to tip into just a little Hansa yellow, a little. I got a little too much, so let me go lighten it up again. There we go. And I want to strike some, there we go. Just get some paint on there, all right? We don't want to make a career of the one who's not the star of the show, but she's second. She's going to be second, so we don't want to make her feel bad either, okay? So give her a little bit of petaling. Notice I didn't really turn my book over, and it's giving me a nice look. I'm going to get a little bit of cool right here, because where she is touching Queen, that is a cooler area of Queen. And it just seems like the colors, the hues need to go together right through there. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to restate her bowl area, if you will. So I'm going to come in with a little bit of quinacridone, and I also have the brown madder, and just cool that off. And since I cooled that off, it feels like her center needs to cool just a little bit. Okay. And then I can come back in and I can pull some light up around. Close the bud up a little if you'd like. All right, now need to come over to these other buds, and I'm thinking they need to, maybe that one can cool just a little. It's starting to move away from the focal area, so I'm going to cool it and just kind of give it just a little detail. It's definitely not the star of the show. And up through here, this little guy, it could stay warm. We'll know when we start putting the other colors in how that will work. And it needs a little bit of contrast in that center. You can see that it's kind of lost right there. So I'm going to come in with some of those mixes, brush mixed a little bit, modeled it up with the brown madder and the quinacridone violet, and give her just a little bit of shadow. Maybe I'll just kind of pull down, and that's going to be a bud. That's really pretty. I like that. And I like that a lot. So maybe I just want to make this guy, really close the colors up on that one too, so that the color moves through the composition. Alrighty. Now, I am going to rinse my brush and I'm going to move over to my greens and start pulling in a little bit of negative painting. Now, this is pine green. It's on the warm side. Let me tilt that up so you can see. And I rinsed because green and red are opposites on the color wheel. And if you mix them up, you're going to get gray, and I want to be able to control that. So I'm going to reach over into brown madder over to the side, and that's going to give me a warm darker green toned, and then the quinacridone will cool it down just a little bit. And now I can come in here and I can negative paint right along the queen, and that contrast just gives her some edging. Alrighty, see, it gives her some nice edging. This color, I'd love for this color to come into my rose. I do this often. I'll just let the green streak in because then I can go back and restate something and I'll have some really lovely lost and found edges. I'm going to do that over on this side. All right, see, that's nice. Starts mirroring everything together. I'm going to come in with this green. Let me drop all of this down here so you can see it. That's got a glare on it. Let's pop a tube of paint up under that and see if that will help pop that glare a little bit, huh? Let's try something else here. I've got one more of these little guys and that might, there we go. Now I think you can see that a little better. Sorry about that. Now I have this warm darker green here. I also would like to have cool it even more. So I can pull this pine green over. I could choose to cool it with the blue. That's phthalo. Okay, see my phthalo there? I could choose to put it in there, but it's not going to tone it as much. So I may still have to go into some red violet or quinacridone. I'm all the while watching it in relation to this. I want this one to be cooler than that green. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to cool some of this green right through here. Okay, let me tilt that up. All right, better. And I'm also going to move this green around in my composition. Alrighty. And this green can come up over. Maybe there may be something that's going to happen up on this bud that gives it a little bit of movement. I can choose to go back into my pine green and warm it up a little bit, you know, because there will be some warm greens obviously in the composition as well. And I'm thinking warm would probably happen up here. All right, just some movement. And if you get too much, that might be a tad much. We'll just go back and take it back out. We can negative paint the green right back out too with interest. I do a little brush dance, if you will, to soften some of my greens and my pinks and whatever, you know. So that's kind of one of those things at the end, little tricks of the trade that just all of a sudden you go, oh, that's how you did that. That's where you got that. Now, if I pull this green up on that rose bud, you can see how the green will tone that down, okay? And I can take over, I'm really thinking some of this green really needs to pop out into this background a little bit, okay? Not to isolate it. I love the movement that that gives. We really would probably have some sort of leaf impression. Let me get some underpainting there first. And maybe that should be more of a cool green since it's falling down in that area. If you want to be able to see it, you can add just a little bit of titanium white to it, and maybe we can just pull the impression of a leaf, maybe some cooler green down through there. Maybe we'd have some scribblies or casual, casual, not scribbles, casual greens out to the side, okay? And if they aren't moving, I think this book still is grabbing just a little bit. You know, your surface matters, but that's okay. We just work with it, all right? Now, I really like that. And I feel like we don't want this cool green isolated. You don't want to isolate it, but you got to think about where your warms and cools will occur. So I'm going to cool down a little bit more intense of a cool green and just kind of move it just a little bit, all right? That looks pretty, pretty, pretty. I'm liking that. Now we also would have maybe the impression of stems. I do like to use dioxazine purple, even though we haven't used it in the palette, so you have to be kind of careful. It does darken up pine green really nice, and to me it gives me the opportunity to use, you know, I love to use it on these books for stems. And you don't want them to be soldiers in a row, so if you want to drop one, I got all three, of course, almost the same length. Yay. I always do that, so, you know, I'm sure you're not alone. Don't worry, I do it too. I like some of that dark green. See how that starts really, let me tilt that up for you. See how that starts popping the queen off of the canvas, if you will. We can move that green around, the darks, maybe pull some of the darks out here, wherever you feel like. Now, that light that I put in to start with, because I was unsure about exactly where my composition was going to go at the end, that's no problem because it won't be isolated when we get done. Okay, so that's not bothering me yet. Okay, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to reassess my roses, because now we have some green. So, and remember, this is like a warm green against the coral. So let's talk about that a little bit. Everything that you paint, no matter whether you're painting roses or you're painting landscapes, still lifes, portraits, all of it involves color theory. All right, there's really no way around it if you really want to learn and start understanding, what a warm color is, a cool color is, going from, reds and knowing that green is the complement and they will tone each other, what the effects will be. Yeah, you can work with it and follow along, kind of monkey see, monkey do through the YouTube videos and in classes. But to really become your own artist, you really need to study color theory. You need to work with the paints, work with the colors, and really get to know that. And my colleague, David Jansen at Jansen Art Studio, he has a wonderful color theory online class that has been going on for over a year, and it's a lifetime. So you can always go over and take a peek at that, and I highly recommend it. I'm in that class. A lot of us, I just can't get enough of it. I love studying the color and working with color theory because, it's what I do, but I enjoy the art. I want to grow as an artist. I don't want to just copy. So, if you want to become your own artist and understand what colors and hues to choose and really grow as an artist, I highly recommend that you look into that, okay? So let's go back over to our painting. And that, understanding the color theory and the temperatures and all, right now I know that this highlight on my rose is isolated, and I know I need to bridge the colors, the values, the hues, okay? So what really I need to bridge first is the value. So I'm going to come in, now that's a very, that's off, that's a blue-green, wrong pile, that's all right. I want to come over into the pine green. I'm going to warm it back up, and that's I just neoned it up a lot, okay? But I added Hansa yellow because I know that Hansa yellow will add some intensity and give me a yellow-green with my pine green. Then I'm going to lighten the value, which when I lighten the value, it will also automatically kill the intensity just a little bit. It'll tone that color. Now, I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, I could bridge this a little bit. This is super duper dark green coming off that rose, but I need some highlights. And this is too big of a value jump. Do you see that? That value jump is a little bit too much, but that's okay. Because the paint, while it's wet, I can come back in with a middle value and just kind of push and pull and have it right there. All right, I just lost my book easel there. So I like that. And maybe not to isolate, I may want to bridge down, with something that resembles a leaf or something that started to fall off. I have a little bit too much right in there, and that's the beauty of it. You can just go back and forth, no big deal. I can come back with any deeper green. I think we had a little bit of dioxazine in there, and I can go back and separate and draw some shadows back in if I want, okay? So see that color different hues on top of other hues and values and tones really starts bringing some depth to my painting. Alrighty, I see that I really want a little more of this yellow green popping up here. I think that'll add a lot of interest and really say, hey, look over here at the queen. She really is looking for some attention, okay? She's queen of the composition. She's Queen Rose, all right? So we want to give her what she deserves. Remember that acrylics will die down. They'll dry 2 values darker. So, this may not be as light as it looks right now when it dries. I want to make sure I don't end up with, a halo of any sort. Now I'm going to tone that down just a little more, not quite as light and bright, and I'm going to work down into this other area, just so my colors and my values kind of drop. I'm not real worried about getting onto that rosebud. In fact, I think that's kind of pretty. Super casual. You can see I'm back on this part of my brush and just kind of letting my brush kind of dance. All right, just doing a little bit of a leaf and dance around, moving color. There's a lot of streaking in this, which might distract from my rose just a little bit, so I might take and push and pull that one more time. It might be that it needs to have a little bit more dark on it, and then pull that light back over it again. It's okay, it's only paint, okay? And if you want to give the impression of a vein line, you could in the ones that are closer to the focal point, meaning up here by Queen. Make it look like she has something of a vein. I'm a super casual. The leaves for me are not the star of the show, so I don't make them the star, that's for sure, okay? In and out and back and around until I feel like they've got what I want, you know, the look that I want. Now, I do like to come in and take some of the green and come into my rose. All right, and you're like, oh, you destroyed it. Yeah, it's okay. I'll be able to come back with that color now and give it a transparency. So you can come back with some of those peach colors, which was the naphtha red light, and a little bit of Hansa yellow, white, a lot of white. So see, I was able to get right back to where I was. And I may thin that just a little bit, give it some movement by getting into some extender. And I'm going to come in and I'm just going to, in that green, just let this color kind of melt into that green just a little bit. That's kind of pretty. It makes it look like she's torn. Her petal isn't perfect out there. I love that look. And maybe if that's a little too much, I can come back and just edge it just a little bit out on that, and edge again. Which, isn't that pretty? Look at that. That just pulled all of the green into the rose and married that together, all right? And you can also do a little bit of that down on your bud if you'd like. So if you'd like to just kind of work that green, my finger had a lot of green on it right there. No big deal. So, my finger definitely had green. Don't forget about your finger having other color. And then pull the green over it. I love to just kind of work back and forth until everything just kind of marries together. Okay. There we go. That really softened that up a lot. And you can work back and forth between your warm and cool greens. Notice these two are still touching. There's something down there that's touching. It looks a little awkward. It looks like I've funneled it in just a little bit. So since I have that going on, I'm gonna rinse my brush, and I'm gonna pick up just a little, work in a little of that toned color off my palette, maybe lighten it just a little bit, not too much. And I'm thinking that I should come in and definitely make it look like I have some more petals, reaching petals on my bud. Because if not, it wasn't marrying together very well right there, was it? And now I see that I'm going to now have to go in and restate my shadow from my bowl. And I'm starting to really like that. That's starting to look nice. And I got a little line. Now when I tipped it up, can you see that line right there? No big deal. You can just come in and soften it. Okay, that's kind of pretty. Very, very casual. I have some casual stuff happening there. There is color that might need to move, which is the color that's in the center of your rose. So I'm tilting it up because it's hard for me to see under the light exactly what my whole composition is. You got to remember, your perspective is going to change. Also remember, I forgot to tell you, when you're painting these flowers, remember you got to step back from that book, just like you would if you were painting a canvas. The canvas, you know, you're looking for optical blending, so you're wanting things to kind of move. And the same thing happens with a book or any other painting that you're doing, you want to be able to step back from them and still have movement, okay? Or optical blending rather. So you got to have quite a bit of movement so that when you step back, you can still see your rose and, you know, the textures and that kind of thing. Nothing changes just because it's on a book, alrighty? I'm going to come in for one last round of highlight on Queen. She looks like she could use just a little more. And those highlights are still the same colors we used before. Naphtha red light, Hansa yellow, and then white, okay? So I'm going to come in. I'm trying to get it light enough. I don't want to go in there too dark. And I want it to be really thick. And it's just paint, right? But I want to just really pop that highlight right up at the front and then move it around. I just stopped myself and looked at my thumb. I didn't want to wipe the green across that, okay? And that's, you know, my calligraphy happening right there. Let me grab another paper towel. Don't forget to pinch wipe often. Now, I feel like that highlight's going to be a little isolated, but I don't want it to be quite as light in the other highlights of that rose. So I'm going to come around on this side and just kind of push and pull and just a little bit more of that light color, something in between, so that I have movement. I'm looking for balance. I'm looking for movement, okay? It's not that I'm really doing anything with petals, alrighty? I could also come in, that one bottom section is still bothering me just a little bit. So, you know, you're gonna have to look and see what your rose needs at that juncture. For me, I'm thinking I could pull this reaching petal out just a little more and see how that takes and softens the look of this guy down here. And it still looks like I could probably lighten and soften him up and really give him a little bit more movement. The coolness in the throat there, if you're being really picky, is not occurring in the throat of the other rose there, the rose bud. So I would come in as one last thing. And, you know, that's what you're looking for when you're almost done, is balance, and make sure you didn't isolate something, okay? Make sure you don't get that too bright. And if you do, you can come back later and work with it as it dries. You'll know if it's too light or, you know, exactly what you did. It'll start, remember what I'm trying to say is that it will darken down 2 values. Acrylics dry 2 values darker. So sometimes you just got to let that dry, and then you'll know, you know, you'll all of a sudden go, oh, I got that a little too dark, and that's okay. It's a paint. You can go back in it the next day if you'd like. No big deal. Okay. And I keep putting it in there and taking it right back out instead of leaving well enough alone while I'm talking to you. I do the same things that you guys do. All right. And I just want to make sure that those colors are going to kind of dry and have similar hues. So I'm going to work that color up into my Queen just a wee bit. And now's when you're going to assess it and say, okay, so, you know, what do I need to soften? What do I need to do for maybe if you want some reflective light in there? I'm really keen on doing the reflective light. And remember, the opposite, this is where your color theory comes in again. The opposite of orange or peach is going to be blue or a light blue on the color wheel. So a blue reflective light, a blue accents would just really pop this and make it stand out. So let's do that, okay? All right. So I'm going to go in, and sapphire blue is on my palette. Let me move it over here so you can see. And you can do it, you can use different values of it. You can have a light sapphire. It's, you know, you can go in with the light to first. Don't go on the Queen to start with. Kind of tease it out to the side first. And I feel like that's going to be a little too light. So I'm going to go in and deepen it just a little bit. Okay. And I like that, but I was just playing with it a little too much, so I didn't want to get quite that much out there. Alrighty. And I'm going to come in, I think I'm going to deepen that just a little more right there. That looks kind of pretty. I think that anywhere, how I decide is like where something meets and I feel like it needs to have like broken color, a broken reflection, that's what I'll end up, where I choose to put it. And it also, something that's a little unexpected, maybe a little reflection of something happening. Be careful. Keep doing that it doesn't look like it's a petal out there, okay? So when you get close to the queen or to your roses or your flowers, so you can strike just a little bit of that color. Make sure if you're creating it, don't do too much, but you also want to make sure that you're moving it. So, if I start seeing it, it's got to move in the composition so it's not isolated, and it doesn't have to be in the same values, and it could just be kind of streaked through if you want, okay? So I can come and streak that through. Remember, we talked about this blue or a warm and cool when we first started, and I said you can go back and add those kinds of things. I don't want it to look like a sunburst, so so you can come back in at any time and calm just a little of that back down with some of your warm greens. All right, you can come back to in and push it back so then it's occurring behind it and it kind of softens it just a little bit. All righty, and that looks really nice. I'm really liking that. Yeah. All right, and you can let it dry, and you'll know when you come back to look at it if you feel like it needs a little bit more, maybe up into the flower. Even though a little is good doesn't mean a lot is even better, so be aware of that. The only other thing I might change is maybe make sure that this registers as a leaf. I'm looking at that now, and I'm like, oh, maybe it doesn't really register as a leaf. That's being super duper picky, and so you can do what you want with yours. I would like this to maybe look more like a leaf, so I may come in and just give myself a little bit more green moving around there so that we start identifying as a leaf, okay? And I really like that. It's kind of pretty. And we have our queen. We have a bud that's, like just starting to open. She's obviously going to be like this one. And these, I chose to leave them the same color because you're working with the hues and generations. And these, there's hardly anything to those. Just when you look at them, they're going to register flower to you, rosebud, because the rest of the composition is a rose. All right? You could take, and now that we're on that one little part of the leaf, now that it's in there, I can take and lighten it just a little bit, again, just to bridge some of my highlight. That's all I'm looking for, okay? So back and forth, but you'll know exactly what your rose needs, okay? So there we are. I have no idea how long this took us. Oh, it took us a little while, but moving back and forth, practicing roses, making your own corrections, when you're painting, if you have corrections to make, instead of saying, okay, so let's paint this whole thing out. I really feel like I messed it up. And sometimes if you just stop and think and look at it, correcting what your eye is seeing that it perceives as a mistake, it may not even look like a mistake to someone else, but to have the skill and to work with that, build your eye, build your technical skills, your knowledge of what colors, what hues, what do I need to strike in there to fix whatever it is you're perceiving as that's not coming across exactly right. That's way better than painting something out. You will lose, learn so much from doing that. That's how teachers get so good at what they're doing, is because, they have to go and they're teaching. And when I'm in a classroom, I'm walking around and students are, maybe struggling with a rose or a landscape. And they're like, oh my gosh, you just did this, and it's good. And I'm like, well, how many roses have I painted today? When you think about all of the ones that you help your students correct, all of the demonstrations I've done, I've probably done 20 to their half or one. It really makes a big difference. So practice, paint. We have nothing but, some time on our hands while we're all social distancing. And it's super important, if you're enjoying art, that you hone your skill, practice, paint. It's good for the soul, and it just makes me feel good in times like this. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll have the link in below. And I have all the supplies, all the paint, and all on my website. I'm going to be launching my online class very soon, so I hope you'll watch for that. And I hope to see you either on YouTube, over in the classroom, maybe in another class we're both attending at the same time, on social media. Follow me on Facebook, DeAnn's Art Studio and Gallery. Also follow my Instagram, DeAnn's Art Studio and Gallery. And I even have a Twitter. I haven't done a whole lot with that yet with the art, but I plan to. And so enjoy your art, enjoy your journey. Don't get frustrated. Just paint, 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 and trust me, it will come. And everyone stay safe out there. That's super important right now. And we'll see you real soon. Thank you.